The United States economy is grappling with significant challenges exacerbated by the ongoing war in Iran, which has triggered a fresh oil crisis. Despite claims from US President Trump that the nation has become the hottest country in the world under his leadership, the promised golden age appears more distant than ever. Adding to the economic uncertainty, President Trump's tariff policies recently failed before the Supreme Court. However, German-American economist Ruediger Bahk-mahn, who teaches at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, expresses profound skepticism about whether the struggling U.S. economic situation truly concerns President Trump. Bahk-mahn suggests that President Trump's motivations diverge sharply from traditional political thinking. When asked if President Trump should end the Iran war, given the common political adage, "It's the economy, stupid," Bahk-mahn's answer is a resounding no. He argues that such an assumption mistakenly presumes President Trump's primary goal is to win upcoming midterm elections. Bahk-mahn believes President Trump is largely indifferent to whether his party retains control of the House of Representatives or the Senate. For him, other objectives take precedence. According to Bahk-mahn, President Trump is primarily focused on making money for himself and his inner circle. He outlines two possibilities. First, that President Trump is genuinely unconcerned about Republican electoral losses, believing he can pardon himself and his close associates in the latter half of his term, effectively sidestepping legal repercussions. The second, more concerning possibility is that President Trump might attempt to prevent future elections from being free and fair. Bahk-mahn highlights various scenarios currently under discussion, such as potential Supreme Court rulings on mail-in ballots, or the possibility of President Trump instructing the Postmaster General to delay ballot deliveries. He also mentions the potential deployment of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, officers to polling stations under the guise of protection. Bahk-mahn is convinced that President Trump can remain indifferent to the broader economic situation because his focus is not on the American people, but on himself. He describes President Trump as a New York real estate person, a kleptocrat, and an entertainer. This combination, which Bahk-mahn terms Powertainment, allows President Trump to remain a constant topic of global conversation while his family and associates engage in highly lucrative business dealings. This entire strategy, Bahk-mahn contends, serves one primary function: the enrichment of President Trump, his family, and his inner circle. President Trump's actions, Bahk-mahn asserts, cannot be rationalized through normal political categories. Attempting to do so inevitably leads to paradoxes. Furthermore, like many autocracies, President Trump's administration fosters an environment where he is surrounded almost exclusively by flatterers. This constant praise, as seen in reports of President Trump receiving only best-of videos depicting victories in the Iran war, can severely impair his judgment, a hallmark of what Bachmann calls a bad autocracy. Economically, the situation in the United States 3 weeks into the Iran war is predictably not good, with the full ramifications yet to unfold. Bachmann warns that the longer the war and the blockade of the Strait of Hor-mooz persist, the higher oil prices will climb, directly impacting consumers. While the United States is a net exporter of oil, allowing some groups in the oil industry to profit, most Americans are net consumers and will suffer negative effects. This creates a significant distribution problem. The economic downturn extends beyond oil. The recent U.S. economic upswing under President Trump was not broad-based, largely driven by the artificial intelligence-related construction sector, particularly data centers. This AI boom could now be hindered by rising construction costs, threatening crucial investments. If this sector falters, the impact will be immediate. Moreover, escalating energy costs will eventually affect the general price index, suggesting troubling times ahead. Bahk-mahn envisions a long-term scenario he calls death by 1,000 cuts, potentially leading to a technical recession if the Strait of Hor-mooz remains blocked for months. Even without such shocks, America could stagnate, with resources diverted to corruption and political favors rather than innovation. This pattern, he notes, has historically preceded the economic decline of great nations. Bachmann also raises concerns about suspicious market movements preceding President Trump's policy reversals, such as those observed before the announcement of peace negotiations with Iran. He notes similar patterns before other policy changes, which, he points out, are not being investigated in the United States, hinting at potential insider trading. He also observes President Trump's increasingly anti-European stance, suggesting Europe's attempts at a pendulum policy, a mix of persuasion and threats, have proven largely ineffective. For an improved economic outlook, President Trump would ideally need to end the Iran war in a way that stabilizes the oil market, reverse his tariff policies, and undo many of his crazy economic decisions. He could have been a successful president by continuing the economic policies of Joe Biden, which were projected to lead to abating inflation and rising wages by 2025. Instead, President Trump and his supporters mistakenly believed his narrow 2024 victory granted him a mandate for Project 2025, a plan for an ultra-conservative overhaul of the US government that he previously claimed no knowledge of. Looking ahead to the 2028 presidential election and beyond, the economic state of the US hinges on whether the Democratic Party can regain control of the House of Representatives or the Senate. While many of President Trump's policies, largely enacted through executive decrees, could be reversed by a successor, the long-term damage may be lasting. Bahk-mahn predicts persistent scars, including a significant erosion of trust among citizens and international partners. Highly qualified individuals from abroad may reconsider investing their human capital in the United States, and universities could become more cautious. Even with a potential Democratic president, international skepticism will remain, making long-term investment decisions in the US more challenging, especially with the possibility of another political swing to a future MAGA president as early as 2032. What's your take on Economist? Trump unmoved by Iran war's economic toll. Share your view in the comments. Do you think this will matter in the next news cycle? This video was generated using artificial intelligence.